Coming to you live from my apartment, it's Rob Has a Podcast. And now here's a guy who won't sleep tonight. Thank you, French Carnival clown. I am Rob Sesternino. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We're live after an Amazing Race episode. I feel like that this is probably the first time in at least 4 years, maybe 5, that we've been live after an episode of The Amazing Race. So when people say 2020, not so great, point to this as one of the things that we could look back on as we talk about the 5th episode of The Amazing Race. And we are very sad to see Michelle and Victoria have a complete collapse meltdown on this leg of the race. And somehow Kaylyn and Hayley advance. We'll talk about it all here tonight as we are live with our panel. Here tonight, of course, our chief Amazing Race correspondent is back with us, the great Jessica Leese. Jess, how are you?
I'm doing great, Rob. I'm really excited to talk about all the action that went down in the tent, find out who won Star Baker, who got the Hollywood handshake.
Yes, the great French bake-off tonight on The Amazing Race.
I mean, real talk, that's the only reason I already knew what chantilly cream was.
Okay. All right. Well, you can explain it to myself and this man who I'm podcasting with for the 4th day in a row. Give it up for Mr. Mike Bloom.
I am so excited, Rob. This is going to be it's going to be I'm so sorry. I'm stalling out on my introduction. I should have put this thing in third. It's been first for the entire time. Let me just shift and I'll be able to adjust
move
from
over
there.
And we'll just go past you and do the rest of the show.
But Rob, you can show empathy, okay? Don't be so rude about it in your green tights while you do it, little Robin Hood.
Look, we don't forget, okay? We move on. We don't forget. All right. Very excited to have you here with us. I put out a link on Twitter. At Rob Sesternino is my Twitter handle for the people, the fools that are not following me yet. You can go ahead and reply and ask your questions live here on the show. And this is just one of 2 Amazing Race conversations we will have with this panel, as we will be back this weekend for the podcast hit, The Tar Pits, sweeping Amazing Race Nation, as we are going to include our interview with Michelle and Victoria. Jess and I will speak to them sometime between now and then, and you will hear it in that episode. And be sure to check out Mike Bloom's conversation with Michelle and Victoria up on parade.com.
I do not know how it is going to translate to the written word, but I am so excited. We'll see how many I love yous we get out of the conversation as well, since apparently that is now their new hot phrase.
I love you?
Well, yeah, but they actually did a little bit of speaking of the Star Wars Brain Steel that we did last week, Rob, did you hear the sort of Empire Strikes Back motif we got at the end, where I think Michelle said, I love you, and Victoria said, I know?
Yes. Okay. I was a little bit all right, end of the episode. Okay. I checked out for a second there at the end, but I thought it was a really fun episode tonight, Jess.
Yeah, I don't blame you, Rob, for checking out a little bit at the end because you were so stricken with grief over the loss of Michelle and Victoria.
I know. I do love Michelle and Victoria, and I realized, Mike, I couldn't believe it that we lost them. I feel like that I was not even mentally prepared that they were going to go out. I feel like that we had 2 hours to prepare for Kaylyn and Hayley going home, and then it was like me at the mat, and it's like, guess what, Rob? It's got a surprise for you. Wait, what's that? They're eliminated. What?
I cannot think in recent memory of a bigger collapse in Amazing Race. It actually makes me really think back to Amazing Race season 4 with the infamous John and Kelly, Chuck and Millie elimination, where it was actually a similar situation where John and Kelly were a team that just had a disastrous day. They were behind the entire time. They went for a fast forward that was already taken. And somehow this one team was able to just screw up enough for this one team to be able to sneak in at the last second, pass them on the very last task, and check in second to last. And it's a very similar situation that happened here. I think the entire time a lot of us had our sort of editing eye roll emojis ready for okay, they're saying that, Kaylyn and Hayley might catch up, but there's no way they're going to catch up. They keep saying they've never seen another team. And I think maybe it took to that lower third Chiron of saying that Michelle and Victoria were in the car for 6.5 hours to really have the reality set in of, oh my God, this might actually happen. And the fact that we got the build up to the entrance of the roadblock the same way that we usually get a check-in at the pit stop of we don't know who it is, and then it's Kaylyn and Hayley, is all you need to see. This was a comeback in every sense of the word.
Yeah, Mike, do you remember I think it was like season 13 or season 14. I think they were in Cambodia, and there was a team that they edited action shots of them doing the tasks into the mix of everybody else doing the tasks. And then it turned out that team was a full 24 hours behind the other team.
Yeah, I remember something like that. And I was thinking about that too, as to like with the Kaylyn and Hayley stuff. Because again, I was sort of on autopilot, cruise control, if you will, of, oh yeah, they're on making less. I wonder if they made it more competitive by throwing some shots in there. Little did we know it was surprisingly more competitive than we would have thought. So a lot of great editing stuff this episode. It was not needed.
Yeah. Jess, I think just the frustrating thing as a Michelle and Victoria fan here is that it wasn't even like a task that they did wrong. They just couldn't find a place.
Yeah, that is maybe the most upsetting thing, is when a team goes out and you can literally point to the one thing they did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I find that personally much more frustrating than when it's just a whole bunch of little things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't have to go on our exit interview tomorrow and be like, Michelle, Victoria, what happened? We know what happened. We saw it happen. So
and even more frustrating, like, this is not a Kelly and Levon situation where you can fault it on a poor chargerless taxi driver. One of the reasons why Amazing Race fans love self-driving legs is because it is entirely in your hands. Quite literally, you are the navigator, you are the driver. Whatever turn you make is your own doing. And so it makes it dig in even harder that you can't really foist blame onto whatever, I forget the name of the poor taxi driver from Kelly and Levon that they name checked in their exit interview. This was entirely Michelle and Victoria's fault. Now look, I do not want to split up the sisters Newland, but was this Michelle's fault or was this Victoria's fault?
Well, I don't think either of them knew where to go. If one knew, it wasn't like that they couldn't drive the car. It was I think the two of them together that didn't know where to go. It wasn't like that, it was, a case of like Victoria was like, no, get off there, I'm telling you. And Michelle was like missing the exit.
Yeah, it certainly didn't seem that way. It seemed like they were both equally culpable. And it also seemed like they were pretty close to where they needed to be.
Yeah, that poor map.
The map was working overtime.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about this leg here tonight in Paris, France. Jess, were you a fan of tonight's route?
Honestly, this is maybe the most fun individual set of tasks that I have seen on the Amazing Race in a long time. Like, I want to do
Amazing Race.
Yeah, I want to do all of these things. I don't know if it necessarily made for the most competitive television. And honestly, like, we'll get into it. I thought that the actual competitive elements were a little but man, I want to go to the 18th century painting costume party, and I want to go whip some cream and get pies thrown at me. And I sure as hell want to go to that arcade and just hang out there for the duration of a vacation.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Mike, same for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was, to Jess's point, I think this ended up being one of those unfortunate legs where everything was kind of stratified. Like, we saw a little bit of catch-up, obviously, with the self-driving allowing, for example, Hung and Chi to jump from the back of the pack in that second flight all the way up to second place, and almost sort of vice versa with Michelle and Victoria. But I think, like, it was definitely one of those things where once the Volley Bros got out in front, there really was no looking back. It was a horse race and not one that you roll a ball into a hole to advance the horses forward. It really did seem like everyone sort of stayed in their lanes for a good part of it, saved those couple of place changes. But the tasks themselves seemed, some of them seemed incredibly difficult that we'll get to. All of them just seemed very fun, culturally connected. Like, it was a goofy ass leg, but I'm here for goofiness on The Amazing Race.
Okay. All right. The teams would head to Paris, 2 different flights. Second flight was only 15 minutes behind. That is Jessica Lease approved, correct?
Yes. If we're going to have 2 flights, we can't make them so far apart that the teams in the back can't get caught up to the teams in the front.
Okay. So we had some excitement getting out of the parking lot at the airport when a Jessica Lease staple, one of the maybe number 1 on the JR rules, learned to drive a stick shift before you head to the Amazing Race. We saw that Will and James were struggling quite a bit. Will in the driver's seat, and he had the actually like the great fortune to be at the front of the pack other than Riley and Madison when just we saw a traffic jam developing.
Yeah, I would say that Will and James not being able to drive stick at this juncture is practically a 5-hole because they are such avowed fans of the show. In fact, to the point where I saw the preview of this, I immediately slid into James's DMs. I'm like, dude, what the hell? How come you guys
with them?
How come you guys practiced balancing bottles on your heads in case you went to Paraguay, but you didn't drive stick? And he points out that, and the racers do. I think I've seen every racer sort of struggling with this public perception versus what actually happened. He points out they were exhausted, and it was something that Will was actually very good at driving stick, but he just kind of something in his brain didn't switch on the right way, and he just couldn't get it into gear right away. So it was not that he didn't know how to drive stick. It was that he was not doing the thing that he knew how to do.
Yes.
And we heard as much. They literally said on this episode, they said, oh, we practiced stick before this. Because I agree. When we saw the next time on, I'm like, all right, here it comes. Why did you practice balancing bottles on your head?
Exactly.
And then when you actually have a talking head of them saying like, oh, I practiced stick shift, you're like, of course, yes. Now it makes sense they would practice stick shift before the race. It was just extenuating circumstances. And I think it also shows practice may not carry over to the race proper. So you can prepare as much as you can, but when push comes to shove or when stick comes to shift, things might turn out completely different.
Yeah. Is it Eisenhower that said that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable?
Yes.
Is that
yes,
one?
It was.
Is this one of the games? Are we jumping into the tar pits right now? Eisenhower.
We're not on the tar pit, Mike. That was a rhetorical question.
Well, I know that Eisenhower was responsible for the interstate system, so I think he would be totally fine with driving stick shift around everywhere, assumingly so.
Yes. It was also another president that said, speak softly, but carry a big stick shift.
That's true.
Yes. All right. So, Jess, I think this was a very interesting confrontation that we ended up having on the show because, so Will is stuck. Teams are behind him. People are honking their horn. They want to get out of the parking garage. Leo comes up and says, hey, let me just move your car. Interestingly, there's no love lost here on the race between Will and James and Leo and Alana here at the time of filming the season. And that I was surprised that I feel like if you're Will and James, can you say to Leo, no, I don't want you to just move our car?
They really have no power here. It's funny. They have to take whatever Leo is willing to give them.
Why?
And because otherwise everybody's gonna sit there. Like,
isn't that what you want?
Blocking the only egress. I think what everybody wants is to get there because there might be another way out of that garage that you can go out if you get there 15 minutes later, for instance. Yeah. And all of a sudden, all of the teams at the back of the pack have passed you. So he has to get moving somehow. And everybody else has to also get moving. So you pretty much, I think there's not much else Leo could have done for them. And there's not much else that I don't think, I think there's really only one move here. And that is to get their car out of the way so everybody else can go by. And that's helping. That's helping Will and James because they're not stuck in the middle of the road feeling anxious. And it helps everybody else because they can get out behind him. There might be Leo might have looked at their car and in case there's something wrong with the car, as I think Will was sort of thinking at the beginning, but he also demonstrated for them. I think that was also helpful in its way. He's demonstrating for them there's nothing wrong with your car. There's something wrong with you.
Leo is so damn shady. And I love
very
it.
Shady. Yeah.
He is Alana seems to be the person that is totally fine and over, build a bridge, let's get over it. But Leo is standing there with a match lit, being like, this bridge looks so good. This bridge looks so burnable right now. He's calling Will and James incompetent. He's calling them losers. He compares them to poop, saying they clogged the plumbing in the parking garage. Then there's that incredible moment.
Yeah.
One of those things that as a cameraman, you're thank God I captured this, where Leo is shit talking Will and James. And Will and James walk in simultaneously to the roadblock. It is just, it's poetry in motion, so much so that Alana probably has a master's in it.
So here's an editing question then.
Sure.
Do we think that this is pointing to some kind of epic downfall for Leo and Alana because they are always being shown as being kind of the villains here?
See, it's interesting because, like, I don't know if you look at social media, like 2 weeks ago, you could argue that Will and James were the villains. So I do wonder from that perspective, are the editors trying to paint a villain in any way? Who's going up in that gallery as our bad guys this season?
Yeah, I kind of feel like that. I'm of the mind on these reality shows. I feel like if you have good content, give it to us. Like, don't, if you have a great moment like Leo talking crap about Will and James and they walk in the room, no matter whether you're the villain or not, like, put that in the episode. Like, don't leave gold on the cutting room floor.
Well, of course, I'm not advocating for leaving that out because it was the greatest moment of the entire episode and arguably the entire season so far. But there are also just like little moments where, Will and James are talking just as much shade, but we get a lot more of Leo kind of criminal masterminding things.
Oh, called Spencer Reed.
Oh, no.
Yeah, exactly. At what point do we have to start billing this podcast as a Criminal Minds podcast? Just want to know in case we're getting any merch.
Should we get a Lana sweater that says future Mrs. Leo Folsom? Or I guess current Mrs. Leo Folsom?
They're already married, Mike. Ship sail.
Yeah. For people who might only just be joining us live or on the
what is wrong with you?
We had a game on the Tar Pits this past week where we took a look at some of the holiday offerings in the CBS.com store, which includes many holiday Criminal Minds gifts, of course, that, the two things go hand in hand, the holidays and, of course, the serial killing spree of the Criminal Minds.
And look, this is actually a holiday-based episode as well. The snow is falling in Paris, which I thought was very romantic, but also possibly dangerous, especially for those that had trouble shifting gears in their cars.
Yeah. I mean, have we ever seen car accidents on The Amazing Race?
I mean, there was a big ass one in season 7, in quite the opposite way, where someone flipped their car.
God!
Yeah, we've seen a couple of times when teammates have like gotten into fender benders with other cars, or like taxi drivers have gotten into fender benders. But we haven't seen, I think, at least not in a very long time, a visible accident that someone has gotten into.
Yeah, there was, season 29, there was a minor fender bender. I think it was the leg before the troll leg.
All right. Who has an eye for art? Teams are going to go to the museum, and then there is a costume party, and then there are paintings. Match up the people at the costume party with the paintings. Let me just ask a question. Jess, were the people, once they were matched, did they return to the party, the people, the party goers who were paintings?
I couldn't tell if they did or not. I kind of assumed they did because it seemed like there was never the number of people in the room never seemed to go down.
Yeah, but I feel like that we did not see a lot of multiple matches, Mike.
I mean, maybe not on screen. Maybe they did bring over like the Jesus-looking guy and was like, "I am sorry, he has already been taken," and then you have to go back into the party. This seemed, in my opinion, extraordinarily difficult. And it was because like in Amazing Race Canada, I feel like they had these similar types of tasks, but usually you're only given 9 options to choose between. There were only 9 people within that party that matched, but you didn't know that. There was an entire room full of paintings. And so I don't blame someone like Aparna who did a dozen plus guesses, because you're going painting by painting and you're like, okay, maybe this figure is going to be in the party. I'm not entirely sure. And so it really was like almost a winnowing down of, you have to pick the right painting from the gallery, and then from there you have to pick the right person from that painting.
Yeah, it was. There were 2 levels to it, Mike, because I thought at first it was kind of like the thing we saw last season where they were in the nightclub and everybody had the silent disco thing, and you had to find somebody that was dancing to the right beat. And that was just basically, you could just start bringing people up and eventually you'd hit somebody without even having to worry about the rhythm or anything. And this was not only, you couldn't just like blindly bring people because you had to know which painting it was too. And that does make it a lot harder, but I think I saw a couple of people find a good hack for it.
The hung hack.
Yeah, the hung hack. I thought that this was pretty great. You just find somebody that looks kind of epic and then try to find them in the gallery rather than finding a person in the gallery and then finding the real person that matched them.
Yeah. I thought there were some other good hacks. I think it was Riley who said, I'm going to find somebody who has like a specific color and then try to match them up. There was a lot of like drab dress in the costume party.
I mean, essentially, you want to use the Guess Who strategy, right? You want to like pick out very specific things like facial hair or colors, or I think Alana picked out a ring. And granted, again, what makes this difficult is that those people might not be in the party, but at least you're looking for that. Like, let me look at generic 18th century white man number 45 and see if he matches up with this painting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think at one point, was it Riley was trying to find somebody that had a baby as like a...
Oh yeah, he say so I'm looking for either one of them. And it's like, well, one of them is a child.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any babies at this party.
Oh God, and God help me if it's adult babies wandering around at this party. I'll take the 4-hour penalty. Thank you very much.
Oh,
yes.
Full bloom. Okay. The one I really loved, I loved Haley walking through and finding a guy with a huge hat and just kind of looking him up and down and being like, well, he's extremely extra.
Mm-hmm.
It was gifable. It was great.
And I love the montage of Aparna's various guesses where she's like also now, it's almost comparable to her like walking through a bar and picking out people by being like too rich, too complicated. Like now she's trying to find someone to take home instead of to the actual courier at the museum.
Yeah. We had some people who were able to fly through this and some people who really were having some trouble. Mike, who do you think struggled the most? Was it Aparna?
I mean, Aparna definitely was. She was the one that we saw by far. I mean, we saw some people assumingly get it in one guess. Aparna got it in, for my count, at least like 15 or 16 guesses. And, you know, there was a lot of really actually fun editing moments in this episode. And one of them was in the, the initial talk in the episode, Iswar says, you know, I came in here thinking the race could accentuate my strengths, and I realized that it's really just highlighting my weaknesses. And then Aparna deadpans, I don't have any weaknesses.
Ooh.
Evidently she might, and it's this art roadblock because, yeah, by far, she was the one to definitely struggle the most. I think the only person we saw do other multiple guesses was maybe James, who did it in 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jess, we saw Gary and D'Angelo show up, and this was really Gary's task to shine, that he shows up at the art gallery, and who knew this was going to be a challenge that was going to be right up his alley. Certainly D'Angelo wasn't buying it.
And I can't wait to do this challenge because I love art. So like I study detail art. I've been to the Louvre. I've been to multiple different places in the world with art. I have a bunch of art in my house. I just love that type of stuff.
You don't really strike me as a Renaissance man.
I love artwork though. I love artwork. I've
known you forever, Gary, and I've never known. Who are you? You're like 6'6", like a caveman, but you like art.
I do.
R.I.P. Gary.
To be fair, D'Angelo, cavemen did have art on their cave walls, so don't go, striking down cavemen as uncivilized people.
I was unaware that there was a height limit for who can appreciate art. Is it like the reverse of the roller coaster at Six Flags?
Yeah, you must be this short to enjoy the art.
Yeah, but he's been to multiple places in the world that have art.
Including the Lou.
Yes, his art in his home. I don't know about JJ. Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough to describe from an audio perspective, but they cut to not like it's always a 2-shot, right? Of the 2 team members standing side by side. They cut to a close in specifically on D'Angelo Williams, just like bewildered reaction to this. And that needs to be gifable as well as the Aparna or as the Haley stuff from the art museum, because he is just beside himself. If I've known this man, I have played football with this man for so long, I had no idea that he was an art connoisseur, Gary Barnage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if they ever do another one of the memes on the Amazing Race social media, that's which racer are you? I fully expect one of them to be D'Angelo's face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that most moments, except on a football field. I am D'Angelo Williams, very cranky, hate everything.
Yeah, I mean, who would have
not
thought
happy?
They went from ATF to ART this leg.
That was such a great clip.
It's very funny that we are we're calling out D'Angelo Williams as being one of the greatest Amazing Race contestants of all time, just because he's so grumpy cat about everything and he just sort of abuses his teammate. But I submit that you need an and Gary in order for D'Angelo to shine. Like we always kind of say, like one of the racers is kind of the standout personality and one of them is a dud. But I feel like the two of them together are the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Well, and I think in this case, D'Angelo got to be sort of the straight man to Gary's crazy man of like, here was this seemingly mild-mannered guy who, granted, he can't steel drum, but he seems pretty normal regardless. And he's like, I actually have an enjoyment of fine art. And D'Angelo Williams, I think, has the appropriate action. Like, where did this come from?
Yeah. Just Gary and D'Angelo are bringing big time Ren and Stimpy energy to the Amazing Race.
Gary, you idiot!
Yep, I'm here for that. Well, honestly, I don't know. They get the taller one who's kind of low key and the shorter one who's very excited about everything all the time.
What about like Two Stupid Dogs? If you've ever seen that show,
I have not, Mike.
Yeah.
Again, belying the fact that you're a little bit younger than we are.
Okay. All right. Anything else we want to say about the paintings challenge?
I mean, I do wonder what sort of the casting call was, right? Like, did they put on like spirit gum, fake beards, and mustaches for some of these people? Or did they really call to type of like, you do look like the person from this Giotto painting. We're going to have to dress you up and get you in here with this four-cornered hat.
They didn't all look like people? The guys. Yeah, they didn't all look like the guys in the painting, though. They just were wearing the clothes of the guys in the painting.
Yeah. Sometimes the racers went for people that had like really like misshapen heads. Like it was kind of insulting when they said like, "Oh, you're that painting." Like, no, I'm not.
James's first one where it was like this older Marie Antoinette looking woman, and he brings a significantly younger woman to the poor person. It's like, yeah, this is actually kind of insulting to this figure who just happened to be enjoying her time at the party.
Okay,
well, these could all be people that do like the tableau vivant, like in the Arrested Development episode. Maybe they're into this as a hobby.
I was going to say, had things not gotten so spread out, I do wonder if those actors could have taken revenge by being the people in the tent to throw pies at these amazing racers for getting their appearances wrong.
Let's shift to go to our pie making challenge. Jess, what would you make of the whip cream until you lose all of the feeling in your arms?
That is not an easy thing to do, and they had to make a lot of that stuff. And trust me, like this is something you really want an electric mixer for.
Yeah, you would think so. You would think that, especially like, is there any benefit to doing it by hand? When was it Riley or Madison? They asked the guy like, how many pies do you make a day? And he's like, 13 or 14.
Yeah, the Lay Cake Boss guy. He's like the Duff Goldman of Chantilly was like, oh,
how are you still in business, sir?
He just has really jacked arms that were hidden underneath his chef's coat.
And like, is that all he does all day? Is that his job? Is just like the cream guy, and somebody else puts other stuff in the pies?
Or maybe it's actually the opposite, where like, you know, a lot of chefs talk about when they start in kitchens, they like have to peel potatoes or do like all the mise en place and not even get involved with making the food proper. Maybe there is some sort of like quite literally a whipping boy who just is like a young French loaf, just sort of like standing there whipping cream for the entire time. And his arms are this size of your head.
Yeah, the guy that was working there, he seemed like he was much older. He's like, no, I just supervised that guy.
Mike, what'd you make of the teams then after they make the whipped cream? Then they had to go into the tent to be ambushed by pies.
This was so damn goofy. This was so like, why are they like, well, then we're gonna hit them with pies? It doesn't really seem very French. I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of French comedy nowadays, but I don't think there have been many pie fights since the end of Blazing Saddles. But I mean, it could have been maybe my theory is that these are like PAs who are now like, again, taking out some catharsis on these teams of like, you made me sweat through sitting, watching your ass stack watermelons for 4.5 hours. You better believe I'm pieing you in the face with this stuff.
Yeah, I wish it was a watermelon.
Yeah. I just feel like that they make such a big deal out of like, okay, you're going to go to the place that makes the best whipped cream in the world. We're going to show you how painstaking it is to make just one bowl of whipped cream. And then we are also going to waste an insane amount of whipped cream.
Well, if it's the same whipped cream that the racers are making, again, it's the sort of thing like with the cooking test in Brazil, you don't want to actually eat that because who knows what's in it and who knows like if they wash their hands beforehand.
Also, Riley and Madison, it's called a neck beard net thing. Very unsanitary.
That's a good point. And you would think they would know that given that their dad owns a cookie restaurant.
Yes.
P.S. What is a cookie restaurant?
I mean, listen, it's like Hawaii. I think just the sort of like the mahalo attitude does sort of inform the idea of a cookie restaurant. I would not be surprised if there were many pop-up cookie restaurants in the Hawaiian Islands.
Yeah, but do you just go in and do you like order a main course that is a cookie?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we've got some stuff in New York City, right? They're not cookie restaurants, but I feel like there have been like cereal bars and like grilled cheese restaurants. So I feel like that's sort of in the same course of like, what if cookie, but it's a meal?
Yeah, that's fair. They used to have a whole restaurant that was just peanut butter.
Whoa.
Yeah. Oh
That's
man,
awesome.
imagine throwing peanut butter in the racers' faces.
Hope nobody has an allergy.
I mean, the issue did not seem to be the pies. The issue more seemed like the toques, right? Like the tall chef's hats, because like someone like Hung, for instance, basically got blindfolded when her hat fell on her head.
She just started walking along like that knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
I'll paw your legs off.
We didn't see this happen in the episode, but do you get the sense if somebody would have dropped their pie, would they have had to go back and re-whip it?
I would imagine
Make those pies.
D'Angelo.
You broke Jess.
you broke me. I'm done. I'm out.
Maybe they should have worn the Devo hats on their head.
Yeah, you just upend a pie plate and put it on your head. It's basically a Devo hat. I'm gonna say that everybody thought that was the case. I do not know if that was actually the case, but everybody was extra careful not to drop their pies because they didn't want that to happen.
Oh, but what I really didn't like was Riley and Madison, like pulling a James Hewling BP-17. Why do you have to ruin the blind side? We have so little in our lives that we want to see unsuspecting people hit with pies. Don't tell everybody.
Yeah, it's sort of like being like, just so you know, there's a banana peel on the floor. You better not slip on it. Just, I want to look out for you. I mean, we got our drinking game reference in, right? The Alliance was mentioned in this episode, as it has been for the past 3. There was probably the most innocuous reference to the Alliance, and that the only real sort of like working together happened in Riley and Madison being like, just so you know, there's a barrage of pies in there. But yeah, I mean, definitely ruining the humor-filled aspect of it. But again, even though Leo and Alana were not told about it, they walked in and they were cowering, knowing that a pie was coming somehow.
Well, I mean, if you just have a pie that's just whipped cream and crust, you know that's not a pie for eating because that is boring. It's got to be a pie for throwing.
Yeah, it's a little bit of like Chekhov's pie when you make a bunch of whipped cream pies and then go behind that curtain.
Yeah,
deliver those in that little tent.
Yeah. But I want to talk about the Alliance talk because they said something that I found very, very curious.
Yes.
We have Riley and Madison saying, we have an alliance with the boyfriends. We have an alliance with Chi and Hung. And we also have an alliance with Gary and D'Angelo, but it's not as strong of a thing. It was like we're looking at the Brant Steele alliance breakdowns, and they were like, Riley and Madison have an alliance with the boyfriends and Chi and Hung, and it's a number 9 strength. And then those 4 teams have another alliance that's a 5 strength.
Yeah, was this the cream pie chop challenge? Were Riley and Madison now saying like this is the pecking order, right? Because it seems like the totem pole from the Volley Bros perspective is number 1 is Will and James. Number 2 is Hung and Chi. Number 3 is Gary and D'Angelo, and Eastmore and Aparna nary a mention on their podium there. So I think, you know, Raleigh and Madison have been team like never use the yield. But if things start breaking apart and Riley and Madison have the power, I guess we know who they're going after.
Yeah. Again, the yield was in this episode as well, Jess, and no one was yielded.
Yeah, well, there was no point. I think everybody just kind of assumed that there are teams you haven't even seen. So they all knew Kaylyn and Hayley weren't at any of the tasks and they had a speed bump. So they're like, yeah, there's no point.
Yeah. We didn't spend too much time on the whipping at the task, but we heard recently Michelle talk about how she's not allowed to use knives. Maybe in this episode, we got another clue as to why.
I'm thinking about somebody that I hate their face. Stab it. Who do you hate?
I think we need like a Michelle flashback episode. I know it's not really an episode of The Amazing Race, but I really just want to hear the story of Michelle Newland because I feel like now we're sort of piecing together the clues as to who she is as a person, specifically in the kitchen.
Mike, there's going to be a crossover Criminal Minds episode. Spencer Reed is going to get
Matthew Gray Gubler's going to come in like, all right, we got the old whipped cream stabber. She's back at it again. Her whisk turns deadly.
She's stabbing someone's face.
You know, for a show that none of us have ever watched, we sure keep bringing that up.
Yeah, I have watched one episode, Jess.
Oh, that's right, you did.
Jason Alexander. Yes. On Renap.
My mistake.
Yes.
I'll ask you when I have questions then.
Yes. All right. So let's go and then talk about this horror show, Carnival. Mike did not like this very creepy clown that was handing out the tickets.
I mean, let's put a comma there because Mike did like it because it was just all sorts of uncanny valley. I love the Andersons Funhouse-esque montage of just freakiness between the creepy carousel, between the random guy just blowing bubbles in a corner for nobody in particular. And then,
so creepy.
Were they tiny bubbles?
They might have been in the air. But there was one, the quote unquote clown was more so just like a man in whitish makeup standing on stilts, holding a Chinese fan that had the clue in the background. But I will say, I think he was overshadowed here by the Can Man because the Can Man can.
I love the Can Man. Can Man is like the best. He's the best task guy since Pencil Town guy.
He's just so like he's simultaneously
who can take a roadblock.
Give you lots of balls. Very musical this episode. But I love his energy was both infectious but also patronizing. Like I believe he said at one point, like, I've never seen that before.
Yes. Also, he was like very generous. I thought the object was knock the cans over, and as long as you hit the last can, it's like winner, you did it,
yeah,
amazing! I can't believe it.
Because Madison, like, he touched all 10 cans, not knocked over. He says, "Close enough, you get it."
Yeah.
I want that kind of positivity in my life. Can Man just like follow me around and it's like, wow, you built that webpage. It was great. That's the best podcast you've ever done. It's amazing.
Yes, he can.
Yes, he can.
Man.
He is the Can Man.
Yeah. He makes you feel like you can.
Yes.
It's good.
But I think this is clearly a guy who is like very, given the sort of boring job of man this fake carnival game. Because I can imagine, like, I don't think the museum is usually an active carnival. At least I would not imagine so. So it's clear they're trying to...
could it be though? You're wrecking the illusion, Mike. I want it to be a real thing.
I mean, I would hope so because those games looked really fun, even in a non-competitive environment.
Right.
Yeah.
But imagine like being probably this museum worker who's like now it's stand behind it. And like, I give him all the kudos because like he made a day out of it as opposed to like horse race guy and clown ball mouth man who we're just sort of like, all right, number 2 is the winner.
Ever.
Yeah. I think you could rent it out for corporate functions.
Yeah. I went to a place when I was a kid that was
like the games all still work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the games are all functional. I went to a place that was like all of these old mechanical things that you could put a coin into, and they would do whatever they did, and they all still worked, and you could still put coins in them or play the game or whatever. And it is a lot of fun. And I think vintage arcades, really vintage arcades, I think we need more of them.
Yeah. Mike, what do you think about Phil demonstrating all the games?
Yeah, Phil,
like a natural.
Who's he thinking is? John Montgomery.
I was going to say, taking a page out of Monty's book by being like, I'm going to throw this. I will notice he did not knock down all 10 cans, but I think Can Man would still call that a success.
Close enough. You got it.
But I loved Phil showing that off. I don't know. For some reason, the one that I was really drawn to was the horse racing one. Maybe because it was the most drawn out, but also because like that was definitely one of my more frequented games. Of course, when I
horse race.
Yeah, well, exactly. Where you slip garnets into those little holes, and Sangman takes them, and she makes the horses move along. But I remember, like, on the boardwalk, it would be like, it wouldn't be horses. They would like tie stuffed animals to poles and use them as sort of the horses to move along. But that's when I definitely remember playing a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I need to talk about my favorite moment from the episode.
Please.
Which was Chi discovering that he had won the horse race. And he stands up and he's like, "Oh, I guess I won. That's fantastic." And it's like, Chi is usually at about a 2 and he was at about a 6. And like for Chi, that's like, that's like Price is Right level excitement.
Yeah, Mike, who knew Chi was like such a ringer at all these carnival games?
I love this idea of Chi just being sort of like, I don't know, this prodigy in everything, almost accidentally so. Like as Alana says, Hung and Chi are sort of covered in magic and fairy dust, and Chi's confessional of like, I just played a lot of tennis when I was a kid. I never frequented the carnival.
Guess there's nothing I can do wrong. It's just perfect.
Now that Michelle is gone, I think Chi is my favorite racer.
Yeah. They are fun, Hung and Chi. Chi was just a dynamo at the carnival. Really, nobody seemed to struggle that much. Just they tried to fake us out that Madison was going to have a lot of problems with completing his tasks.
Yeah, because he failed one time at one of the things, and then he went and did the other things successfully.
I think it's more so that his brother was talking crap about him, and we got a little bit more. My sort of mnemonic device now for the Volley Bros is that I say Riley is Smiley, in that Riley is the brother who smiles more and has like the more visible teeth, as opposed to Madison, whose beard sort of goes down over his mouth.
Yeah,
but Riley is the dark guy, right? He was the one that was sort of rolling his eyes the entire time when he was at the ball throwing, because he's like, "Damn it, Madison, you missed on your first try. This isn't going to go well with Cookie Dad."
Yeah, you have to eat the oatmeal raisin tonight.
You stink at carnival games.
Exactly. But a little bit more of a pop from them. Obviously, this was a big episode from them. Also, probably one of the most dominating performances we have seen so far. I think just the leg structure had them blazing out to a lead since the parking garage that they never let go of. I don't think they even saw other teams for the rest of the leg. It was that dominant.
It's true, and it kind of sucked all of the fun and suspense out of the first half of out of the top level of the leg, because when you see a team like that, and we all three saw them at the beginning and thought these guys are going to win. They're kind of the archetypal team that wins the Amazing Race. And so far this season, they hadn't been winning legs, and to watch them finally win a leg, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that was the thing that was going to happen. Good for them. And it kind of sucked all the oxygen out of the leg until we got to the amazing ending of it.
Yeah. They win a trip to Vietnam.
Yep, and to the spa.
Into the spa.
Phil Kogan saying spa is the best thing in the world.
We had a speed bump in this episode also, Jess. What'd you make of the speed bump for Kaylyn and Hayley?
Yeah, it was a speed bump. It was fine. It was...
Yeah.
Watch some horse stuff.
Yeah, Mike, I don't even know what they were doing. It was just like shine some saddles.
I was like, watch the horse duty off the saddle and the stirrups. This is definitely one of those speed bumps where it's less so like skill based and more so, hey, this is almost like a yield. This is going to be just a thing that delays you 20 minutes. So it was more of a formality for them to get through. But you know what? They got to hang out at like that very palatial estate at the Chantilly. So, and I do feel bad because as they talked about, assuming how long they were lost for, that poor horse probably was waiting out in the cold for quite some time by the time they got there.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of horse imagery in this episode.
I suspect they probably let the horse go into the stable and production just kind of waited. And they're like, oh, okay, now they're pulling up. Get the horse out there. Set up the speed bump.
Did they let the horse into the party to warm up?
I think if they had a horse in the party, that would be a really easy one to identify during road ride.
Is it the horse?
The horse in the painting? Yeah. Winner! Yeah.
Close enough.
Okay. So I guess let's talk about Michelle and Victoria, because Jess, when did you suspect something was off for Michelle and Victoria?
It was pretty late in the episode. I think I was still kind of like, this is like, C- Amazing Race. You got the Volley Bros winning the leg. You got Kaylyn and Haley so far out of it. Of course, they're going to be last. And it honestly, you would think that I've seen upwards of 50 seasons of this show at this point, I would have a better sense of when I was being faked out, but I did not. It was really at the point where they showed the map, I started to suspect something was not right, because they'd never show the map when somebody is lost.
Yeah.
And then I didn't really want to think it was true either. Like, I was very invested in that not being the outcome, just because they've brought us so much enjoyment that when I didn't really sink in until it showed how long they'd been driving. I was like, oh, it's this. Okay.
Yeah. Mike, we talked last week about how this was originally going to be a 2-hour episode on last week's episode. And then we got the personal story bump about Kaylyn and Hayley at the end of the first hour of what would have been last week's episode. And I felt like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense that they're giving us more personal information about them. And then ultimately they were so far behind, it was just a foregone conclusion. They were just going to be eliminated at the end of this leg. And I feel like that Michelle and Victoria didn't even really get a lot of screen time in this episode.
They got a little bit in the beginning. They got their own little personal story bump, but it was sort of repeating a story we heard in the very first episode, right? Of like, oh, we're not really close. This is a way to work on our relationship. They foreshadow their own stuff with being like, we're such opposites. Michelle's the talker and I'm the navigator, and so evidently, that was going to end up being the situation. I think, to your point, on the paper, you would think that last week's 2-hour episode would have been sort of like the fall of Kaylyn and Hayley, just a long 2-hour bleeding out. But it more so turned out to be like the fall and rise of Kaylyn and Hayley, almost like an inspirational sports movie where like they're down and out, but they end up winning that game by 1 run at the very last second to take the pennant.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, and so
it's
it was actually, and so now I think packaging the 2 episodes together, it actually makes a lot of sense, because this was like a very epic ending to the episode, and I can imagine pairing it like a nice fine creme de chantilly with a nice pie crust. It would have been a very fun 2 hours to watch together as well.
I don't know. Did you feel like that Kaylyn and Hayley were victorious in this? I mean, I feel like that they even just like were sleepwalking through the leg, like knowing that they were going to be in last place. And then it was only by a miracle. It wasn't like that they overcame any adversity. It was just that Michelle and Victoria had the like most disastrous finish that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, I think to go back to Mike's baseball analogy that he was just making, it's like when a pitcher is pitching in a baseball game, they could get credit for the win, or the other pitcher could get credit for the loss. And I don't think we can say that this was really like Kaylyn and Hayley are proof positive that if you're really far behind, you have to keep racing because you never know what's going to happen. But I don't know if I could say, like, they seem to do a good job apart from getting lost and being very, very far behind in the beginning. Once they got to the tasks, they made up time. But I don't know that I would say they emerged triumphant from this. They just sort of lived to fight another day.
Yeah. But that also, I think, is victorious. I think the name of the game, the name of the game of the Amazing Races don't get eliminated. They did not get eliminated despite being set up for elimination in this episode. I think I call that a win.
Basically, another team got eliminated for them, so they did not have to.
Listen, Stephen Bradbury has a gold medal for a reason. That's all I'm saying.
The teams started to check in at the mat. We mentioned Riley and Madison were 1, Hung and Chi were 2, Leo and Alana were 3, and then Will and James were team number 4. And Phil had some ATF energy for Will and James at the mat. He's been working on a line like this for somebody. Will and James are going to get it.
Will and James, I'm sorry to tell you that we've had reports from the police department that they want to revoke your licenses because apparently you don't really know how to drive stick shifts.
It's like Phil had the whole flight to France to think about, well, okay, I had that law enforcement line all keyed up and I sort of screwed it up. So I need to pick a different team this time and I'm going to do it again. And this time I'm going to nail it. You got this, Phil. It's going to be great.
I think Will and James are definitely a more welcoming audience than D'Angelo, who is by far like the worst person to take to a comedy club. I think Will and James were like lapping it up like some cream, whereas like I think if Phil Steven pulled off this line in front of D'Angelo, he'd be like, That still isn't
It's
funny.
not funny, Phil.
It's not funny.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? Gary loves art. That's hilarious. But yeah, I now want to imagine that Phil has now like a police line for every single Amazing Race team to use, just in case they like screw something up. Like, oh, you did this. This is a breaking of the law because you screwed up this task so much.
Yeah, Michelle and Victoria, I heard from the Coast Guard that you were extremely lost.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
All right.
"Gee, I heard from the fun police that you were having way too much fun this leg. You got to tone it down."
So we are gonna see Eastwar and Aparna and Gary and D'Angelo basically tie this leg of the race, so they're gonna be 5th and 6th, and then it was just this like some intrigue over who was gonna get to the carnival first, not even the mat.
You never see that edit. You see that edit with the mat, and
Exactly.
it was a curious choice to put it in front of there.
Yeah, who will arrive to the carnival first?
Yeah. It usually, like, in fact, I think previous seasons of The Amazing Race would have edited this to show Michelle and Victoria doing the games and Kaylyn and Hayley doing the games, and like who was actually there first and who's going to roll up to the mat. And they just like, no, we're going to tell this to you chronologically because who are we, Quentin Tarantino?
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. Maybe then actually they go back in time and it turns out that Michelle and Victoria do come in 7th place because they changed the lineup slightly, and that completely sends up a whole multiverse theory. I mean, I like the choice though, because this is a crash and burn that has not been seen on the same level in quite some time. And so I like the idea that they embrace that it's unconventional, because they really had to show, as much as we love Michelle and Victoria, how much they spent a quarter of the day driving around looking for that museum. That just needs to be focused on right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing. I would thought we were gearing up for a field elimination when they showed how long they've been driving around, and thought, is Phil just going to be waiting for them at the carnival, and they go to get their ticket and it's Phil?
Loser.
Yeah, well, that happened in Amazing Race Australia, right?
Oh,
Just
yeah.
like one team just got so horrifically lost that like they actually found them on the side of the highway and eliminated them there.
Yeah, not great. Not
Not
great
great.
for Michelle and Victoria. Mike, can Kaylyn and Hayley, do you feel like that they can ultimately bounce back and avoid elimination in the next leg?
Completely. Listen, they're going to be going to Germany. I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of equalizing train or plane for them to get on that's going to put them all. I think the only reason why we had 2 dividing flights in this episode is because I think a flight from Paraguay to Paris is very rare. So I don't think you can necessarily book 8 teams on one particular flight. So I think there's going to be a very easy opportunity for them to catch up. I think there's going to be a big surprise reaction to start the episode. I
don't know how rare it could be. I mean, there were 2 arriving within 15 minutes of each other.
Yeah, but I guess and I guess maybe not. Maybe they're so busy that they had to book 2. But I think
perhaps were there maybe they go someplace and then there was a connection of like they both got on different flights.
Yeah, they probably like one of them connected through Heathrow and one of them connected.
I don't know.
through-
Somebody go into the Travelocity app. It's so easy to use. You can figure out how to fly from
I use
Paraguay.
that app anyway. It's pretty great.
Mhm. But I guess with Kaylyn and Hayley, I guess what my point is that in last week's leg, how many hours were they behind the pack? Then they got the equalizer of they were being on the same flight as all the other teams, 15 minutes behind the other teams, didn't have to sit behind Will and James to get out of the parking lot, and also were how many hours behind the pack in back-to-back legs of the race. Like this trend is heading in the very wrong direction.
Especially if it seems like next week, as the preview shows, at least from Will and James' perspective, they are still self-driving. And so Kaylyn and Hayley could run into some trouble. It seemed like Kaylyn in particular got very aggravated at the car. Maybe it's something she can settle into now, or maybe it is just opening a fresh wound. So yeah, I mean, I think just for the sake of competition, we talked on the Tar Pits about how just generally like up and down people are this season, that it really does not seem like there is a horse in this race that is pulling out to a lead particularly. So my hope is that Kaylyn and Hayley can still remain in it, so it doesn't seem like just a 3-week free fall into an eventual elimination in 7th place.
If they can slide a few balls into the red slot, they might be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen teams like that before. I mean, look at Dandrew, for instance, speaking of season 13. Yep. Like, there are certainly teams that have sort of bottom-fed their way. So all Kaylyn and Hayley need to do, like they did this week, is not come in last place. And if they keep doing that enough, they might find themselves in the final 3.
Okay.
This actually raises an interesting question for me, Mike, because this is something we've been getting a little bit of feedback from the listeners about this. And they've been saying, some people are saying, yeah, this crop of racers is much worse than a regular crop of racers. And like, they're all screwing up. They're all doing terrible things. And my question to you is, do you really want a season full of really great racers that are all on top of their game? Or isn't it just as much fun to have it equalized, but have them all be making mistakes? And I submit to you that it doesn't matter whether they're all amazing at it or all terrible at it, because as long as it's competitive, we're getting what we want.
Right. I mean, listen, you're preaching to the choir here. I am the person that does speak up for the train wreck Survivor seasons where it just seems like everything goes wrong and so many big, masterminds get blindsided in the middle of the game. To be honest, I don't really care as long as it's competitive. Like I like to be surprised. I like surprises, as Phil would present to me. So whether or not the bar is high or the bar is low, I just don't want to walk into an Amazing Race episode having a feeling who's going to come in first and who's going to come in last and have that outcome happen. Because that to me means, okay, there might have been some fun tasks, but we essentially are sort of like going through the motions here.
Okay. We are very fortunate because we are live. We are able to take some questions from our listeners. Scott St. Pierre is standing by. We'll bring them up on the screen and be able to answer some of your questions here in real time. But this is just scratching the surface of this Amazing Race week, because we are going to be back with more Amazing Race questions as part of the Tar Pit. So email us your questions, AmazingRace@RobHasAWebsite.com, or you can tweet us, and we'll also post the thread in the Rob Has a Podcast patron Facebook group. All right, let's see what you guys have to say, and let's check in with the great Tara Renee, who says, is Aparna face blind like Akiva?
They both begin and end with A. That's all I'm saying.
Totally possible.
Wow. Yes, according to Akiva, famously, that he does not remember anybody's faces if he sees you places.
Yeah, so maybe that was a part of the thing. She did not go forward with that information. Maybe that's her sort of like, I have no weaknesses thing. But yeah, it could have been a very big possibility that she did not notice the people in the paintings. Or maybe she didn't notice the people in person, but was fine noticing them in the paintings. Either way, there was a disconnect there.
Are there any other ways that Aparna is like Akiva?
I haven't looked at her shoes, so I don't know if she's using Velcro or not.
All right, we'll see. Let's see if it's a runner over the course of the season. Okay. Then A. Scott Falk says, since Renaissance man Gary has a height advantage on the art task, being able to see the second row of paintings better. I don't know if he had an advantage in terms of seeing the art, but Jess, do you feel like that Gary had an advantage in terms of getting a lay of the land of the crowd?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe not necessarily the paintings, but if you go into the room and you can see across the whole sea of people, if you're looking for somebody with a hat, you can see all the hats.
Okay. So good on Gary having the height advantage, being able to see over the crowd of people. Okay. Sabine, she wants to know, are the editors being extra shady towards Leo and Alana between the shot of Will and James walking in and the plop sound effects and the commentaries during Leo's Carnival games? I felt like they were definitely getting the Fishback edit.
Oh yeah, I did notice that they took some stuff from the Big Brother repository when there was that shot of Leo like completely whipping with the ball, and they went through like the entire Rolodex. They went through like boing and wow, like whenever Leo was missing.
Yeah. Well, he talked about that I think it was Alana talked about like, well, Leo played some baseball in middle school and then cut to him doing really bad. And they also had like sort of like take me out to the ball game underneath it as well.
Yeah, so I think, not the best task for Leo, but actually, speaking of Steven Fishback, did you notice that when Leo and Alana in the beginning were talking about previous trips to Paris, that the last time Alana went to Gay Paris, she was 13 and she had a crush on a boy named Steven?
Yes, and another coincidence in terms of people who are not good at throwing, our own Frail Mary had this tweet tonight, said, when Alana had a crush on Steven,
well, no one can say
The Amazing Race.
No one can say she doesn't have a type.
Exactly. Just don't give them something to throw, and that's her mate.
Boy, Frail Mary was live tweeting The Amazing Race. Check that out at Frail Mary. Good, rapid, ready to go.
That's
that gif.
That Stephen Fishback gif of him raising his eyebrows is how Leo reacts to Will and James at any point in time.
Yeah. Okay. This is from our own Dan Heaton. How much does Gary really like art? Wouldn't that have come up on the Cinnamon and Sugar podcast by now?
I don't know. I mean, Rob, you podcast with people like Akiva and Tyson and Josh and the aforementioned Steven. Don't you find out new information about them even years after this point?
I think I've sort of already dumped out anything that I have to say personally, but I'm sure that there are all sorts of other people that always bring in new information. I just found out that anytime Akiva hears about a pickle, his mouth waters.
Exactly. See, this is the thing: is that
Does that happen to Aparna?
Yeah, maybe. Oh, God help her if she has a pickle roadblock coming up.
I'm just gonna say it. We've never seen Aparna and Akiva in the same place at the same time.
My God.
Yeah.
This changes everything. But I think that, it could just be a thing of like, how much are Gary and D'Angelo discussing art? The subject probably has never come up in their many, many conversations that they've had together. It's not like you go through the Rolodex of like, okay, well, we've talked about, fine cutlery. I guess now we'll move on to your favorite kung fu film. This will be the next topic in our friendship discussions. There's not a checklist of subjects.
You're saying that you don't feel like Gary and D'Angelo have been on a lot of road trips together, Mike?
I mean, they're not doing the 50 questions, I don't think.
They're probably talking about football on their podcast, and that just leads to other places. And it's a long road from football to like the use of light in the Dutch Masters.
Yeah, they're not like Sheldon Cooper coming in with a list of icebreakers to use in casual conversations.
Do you think that the Cinnamon and Spice podcast is about football? Because I feel like that it's not a pun.
Yeah, but they're not going to be like, Gary, I heard you went to the Met the other day. Why don't you tell us about your adventures there?
Oh, the Met is a great place to go. Steve Cohen's got things humming over there. So let's see. Cinnamon and Sugar, episode 49. We're back. This week we discuss how rich Gary is. Oh, he's got plenty of money.
Okay, maybe he talks about all the fine art he can afford.
Yeah, maybe he's not very rich because he spent all his money on art.
Oh, check out episode 48. This week we talk with Pops and Frank from The Amazing Race. We end the episode with a little political talk ahead of this week's presidential race.
No, thank you, please. This could be a good tar pit game at some point. Like, has this been a subject on the Cinnamon and Sugar podcast?
Yeah. Episode from October 15th. We're back with more of the dark side of Disney. Whoa.
What? Why are D'Angelo and Gary into like conspiracy theories?
Yeah, they might be just talking about like the America Sings ride that killed a cast member. And
Okay. I might need to hear more D'Angelo.
I gotta go subscribe to this podcast. I think I'm missing something.
Then they gone past your threshold, Rob. They're nearing on 50 podcasts, which means that they're in it for the long haul, apparently.
Yeah. Okay. D'Angelo Williams and Gary Barnage podcast discussing a wide range of topics with listener interactions.
But not art. Asterisk.
Yes. That is basically D'Angelo and Gary talking to microphones on a recorded audio show.
I mean, in fairness, 50 episodes is not very many episodes in the grand scheme. So maybe episode 51 is the art episode.
Okay.
Yeah, I would not be surprised actually if this week they're like, all right, let's talk about this. Gary, really go into length about your love of art.
Sure. This is from Sarah, who says, did Leo's middle school baseball skills help him in this challenge?
No.
No.
Well, I guess the question is, did he have skills?
Well, he said he wasn't good at throwing. I was trying to think, like, do we need to make a list of other things you would be good at in baseball?
No, well, here's the tell here. When we hear that Leo was a middle school baseball player, that you sort of like you reach there's like a Peter principle there of like if he's actually good at baseball, he goes on to become a high school baseball player also. Like
I don't think there's anyone who can say I was really good at something when I was 12 and I'm still really good at it now. You know, I don't think it transcends puberty.
Yeah, it's true.
All right. Sandy says, has there been anyone else that blew this seemingly big a lead than Victoria/Michelle?
Oh, yeah. The Atlanta Falcons.
Hey-o.
Mike's like sports guy this year, all of a sudden.
Listen, I'm Scott. Call me the sports guy. I have to do my job on this podcast.
Yeah, get your spot on the Cinnamon and Sugar podcast.
Yeah, exactly. We're about to like, great guys. I don't want to talk about art. I want to talk about sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe we could get them to come on our podcast and talk about art, and we could go on their podcast and talk about sports.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm trying to think, like, last season, I don't know if this was as big of a lead. I do feel like Brett and Chris really fell very far last season with the finding the coins.
Yeah, that's a good recent one. You touched on a couple of ones that were from the earlier seasons as well. Let's see. Scott, do we have anything? Any other questions from the listeners? Jared says, what do we make of the alliance not being as strong with Gary and D'Angelo? Here's my question, Jess. Do Gary and D'Angelo know?
No. They're in an alliance. Like their loyalty to the alliance is 9, and everybody else's is like 4.
So they're sort of like the Edna Ma to the South Pacific Alliance that is the other 4 teams.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Lorenzo says, in the horse racing thing, how much do you think the other people were trying to win? Mike, did you get a sense that it was ultra competitive?
I mean, I think they wanted to certainly make it tougher for the teams, but I also wonder how much skill was involved because it did seem like a fairly tough thing. You know, like you could, I guess, roll it around to try to get it in that back hole, but otherwise you're just sort of like throwing the ball and hoping that it ends in that red or blue zone instead of yellow.
Okay. Let's take another question from Lulu Wands. There's a supposed 5-team alliance that has been helping each other during tasks. Do you feel these types of alliances have a place on Amazing Race? Don't we want to see teams struggle or succeed on their own merit? Can't we save alliances for BBN Survivor? Preach, Lulu Wands, but I don't know how you're going to enforce that.
I mean, you can't. They're racing unless they're all going to race on different days and have it timed.
Yes, Mike.
They're out there with each other. They affect each other.
What if Phil is able to say at the Met, I just got a call from the
Police.
CIA, the Center for Informing Alliances, and I hear that you are making some major alliances.
And then the pit stop greeter rips off his mask. Dr. Spencer Reed, Criminal Minds, you're under arrest for collusion. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We have heard Corey talk about this. We've heard Scott talk about this. Coalitions and alliances have always been a thing on The Amazing Race. For one reason or another, this has taken the narrative center point. We don't know exactly what that means. So to say, like, can we get rid of it? It's a part of The Amazing Race. It just so happens that this particular season, there happens to be a group of teams that is sort of taking up narrative space where ordinarily it would be there just under the radar that you wouldn't know about it.
Okay. Let's check in with the draft board. Okay. We've got an update here tonight. Team, was it Team Dan took another hit or no, Jess, you took a hit.
I took my first hit. Mike is the only one with his team fully intact at this point, and he's had 2 people to begin with. So
yeah, Jess, going back to our actual draft podcast, I do believe that it was Michelle and Victoria and Kaylyn and Haley.
Oh yeah, there were the last 2
left on the board. I was going to get whoever you didn't pick, and I was completely resigned. Like, well, I'm down to just Gary and D'Angelo. But yeah, so it was they were fighting for last place in our actual draft podcast before they were fighting for last place here in this episode.
It's true. And it was a nail biter then and a nail biter now.
Yeah.
And just opposite outcomes.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, Jess, you want to add about this week's Amazing Race before we come back and reconvene for the tar pits?
I mean, just about everything else that I have is pretty nonsense, so I'm going to save it for the tar pit.
Okay, great. All right, Mike, for you.
Yeah, we got one more chance to talk about stuff. So send in your feedback. Send in any other like Amazing Race adjacent stuff. We're gonna get secret scenes tomorrow. Of course, we'll have our exit press, and we're gonna have a very special guest to join us. And I think we're gonna have a lot of fun no matter what. And also, don't forget, I talked about this on the tar pits, but we are now going to have double episodes of The Amazing Race next week and the week after. So this is essentially the last 1 hour episode of The Amazing Race we got through the month of November.
Okay. All right. So be on the lookout for that. Here's what else is coming up here on Rob Has a Podcast and our reality TV wrap-ups. Puya is back to talk some 90-Day Fiancé the other way. He'll talk with Daniel Kennedy. Check that out in our wrap-ups feed. Also, more Puya. The Masked Singer also airs on Wednesday night. Check out Puya and Liana to talk about the latest reveal from The Masked Singer season 4. Yesterday, I got to chat with Danny Bryson and Tyson Apostle. We talked about how volunteers are needed to check out safety protocols on cruises that are trying to get back in business. Mike, could they entice you to go on a free cruise right now?
As someone who has a fear of open water, you cannot get me to go onto a cruise with or without, any sort of coercion or bribery. I'm not stepping foot on a boat, no matter how safe or unsafe it is.
All right. Well, check that out on the latest episode of News AF. Then, okay, this is a big week on The Bachelorette. Amy and Haley are back to talk about what's going on. There was a changing of the guard. There was a peaceful transfer of power on The Bachelorette this past week. Find out what's going on with Tayshia as she takes over as Claire exits. And this was big news. I wanted to catch up and find out exactly what was going on. So I caught up with Amy and Haley earlier tonight, right before this podcast. That is going to be up in the morning. We're going to post my conversation with Amy and Haley as I try to dig in and find out what's going on and get some clarity on this situation on The Bachelorette. Mike is shaking his head no to that.
Oh, man. O'er Hill and Dale, there was so much controversy happening. I mean, it's really even taken the world by storm, this discussion going on. But I'm excited to hear your opinions on it, Rob, because I know, especially when it comes to these wrap-ups, you always come in hot. And so I'm sure, we were even talking before this about how you have a lot of thoughts about the Claire and Tayshia of it all.
Yeah, just to clarify on the graphic that Amy and Haley they're doing their own recap, and then I also had them as a guest on Rob Has a Podcast proper. Okay, those are two different podcast episodes. That Amy and Haley are a guest on Rob Has a Podcast.
Thanks for clearing that up, Rob.
Just trying to.
I see that there are two different photos there.
Clear that up. Okay. All right. Okay. So then coming we're a little jumping the gun here with this one. That's gonna be check out on Monday. We're gonna have some more talking with T-Bird. Then last night that we had the debut of a brand new Survivor podcast off-season series. Mike, outwit, outplay, outlist.
Here we are, Rob, the Survivor off-season podcast. We decided to start the machine back up. And what better way to do it than to go through some of the most miscellaneous but oft-talked about subjects across 20 years of Survivor. It's sort of like a retrospective on the series so far, while also doting on some interesting cultural touchstones. And we had a great time with Class of 2020 member Jason Reed as we ranked and rated the product placements that Survivor has put out there over 40 seasons. It was a lot of fun. I highly encourage people checking it out. And I think we're going to have another one in the can pretty soon, as well as we're trying to figure out, when and how we want to do this. So it's been a really fun series to debut this week, and I can't wait to do more.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. That's up on YouTube as well. Jess, if we're going to rank the Amazing Race product placements, besides the top two of Ford Motor Cars and Travelocity, is there much more?
I would have a more fun podcast with this if we did Amazing Race Canada, because just about every single leg was sponsored by a different company.
Yeah.
So that's something we could do if we get down to the bottom of the barrel. We could certainly go to that well. But honestly, this podcast, I listened to it today. It was hilarious. It was so much fun. And it's so much better when I heard Mike say, Rob and I have cooked up something for the Survivor off season. We have this series of podcasts. I was like, please tell me they did not just decide to do a different Brant Steele every week. So this is much better.
We value our sanity, Jess, at least slightly so.
Yeah, we did do a Brant Steele on Monday night, though.
Exactly.
Yes, I heard that too.
Yes, we took 16 patrons from Rob Has a Podcast, put them in a Brant Steele, had them all on a Zoom call, and talked to them all the way through. That's not in our podcast feed, but you can listen to it for free at robhasawebsite.com/patron if you want to check that out.
You can also, it's a great, incentive to become a patron because there's a chance you'll be able to submit yourself and participate in a future one, which went extremely well, in my opinion. It was great to have warm bodies in the room to sort of question their motives through the artificial intelligence that is determining their course of the game.
I don't know. When you're talking about warm bodies, Spencer Reed's ears are perking somewhere along the way.
His Spencer sense is tingling.
Okay. All right. Of course, the LFC got back together, believe it or not. First time ever in history that the LFC has convened in November to talk about the stock watch and wrap up, put a bow on the Big Brother season. Check out Taryn, Brent, and the voice of the people, Melissa Denny. And then check this out. We have
Amazing Race.
Yes. Yes. Amazing Racer from season 31 of The Amazing Race. Nicole Franzel, that she sat down with RHAP's own Taryn Armstrong and did a deep dive of her game. Check this out as Nicole Franzel joined Taryn Armstrong for a deep dive into her game. And so, great job. Great job, Taryn, and great job, Nicole Franzel, sitting down and talking about her game with Taryn. Very exciting to hear, and it's 2+ hours with Nicole Franzel. So good job by both of them to put that together. And if you missed the tar pit from this week, still fun.
Yeah.
It's no expiration date on the tar pits.
We had an Amazing Race winner on in Scott Flannery, who is really fantastic. He's a great personality on top of being like an Amazing Race super duper fan. We found out some interesting tidbits, including what happens when teams land in the final city and particularly who they have to encounter. So there was really a lot of great discussion in there, including some review of some fun watermelon-based tweets and clips that were being played. So feel free to check it out. You have several days until we convene again with the tar pits for this week.
All right. And then, of course, you can get in on all the fun. robhasawebsite.com/patron. That is what makes this podcast engine run. robhasawebsite.com/patron for our patron podcast feed and everything else. All right. Thank you so much, Scott St. Pierre, behind the scenes. Also, follow us on social media at Rob Has a Podcast on Facebook, at Rob Has a Podcast on Twitter, and at RHAP Grams on Instagrams, where we're always sharing clips from the shows, including this one. So be on the lookout for that. All right. Tell me, Jess, what else do you have going on?
I've got two big things going on. I don't podcast with you 4 days in a row, but sometimes I podcast with Mike 4 days in a row. Or at least it feels like 4 days because we talk so much. But Mike and I are doing.
That's not an exclusive club of people that podcast with Mike Bloom 4 days in a row.
Yeah, I really don't know why I'd brag about that. That seems like
I have a lot of love to give on the microphone.
Mm-hmm.
It's true, and we shouldn't feel like we're less special just because he does this with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike and I talk about Star Trek Discovery, and we had maybe one of the most accomplished and most fascinating from a truly geeky point of view, like from an anthropological standpoint. I think last week's episode, and in particular our recap of it, is a really must listen. We had a great time breaking down everything that happened, and we are having a lot of fun with this season of Disco. And then also the great Josh Wigler and Brandon Chappelle and I talk about two Walking Dead shows, Fear the Walking Dead and Walking Dead World Beyond, in a pastiche that we call Fear the Walking Dead World Beyond. And I don't believe that watching the show really enhances your enjoyment of the program. So I think you could just dive right in without having seen a minute of any Walking Dead franchise and still be entertained by what we're serving up.
Yeah. It's Jess, it's Josh Wigler, it's Chappelle. I mean, you don't need to
Winning
watch
combo.
the show. Yes.
It's true.
Okay.
It's fantastic.
And Mike, how about you?
So the only one left over is Josh Wigler, another man who gets around on the microphone. He and I are, of course, going down the hatch every week on our Lost Rewatch podcast, talking Left Behind, probably the most Survivor-themed episode of Lost ever, as Hurley tries to avoid Sawyer getting voted out of the group, or so he thinks. Josh and I have a very, very fun time talking about that episode. So be sure to check that out on post-show recaps. Speaking of, 2+ hour podcasts that happen every week. So watch out, Cinnamon and Sugar. Here comes two other guys to talk about probably art as well. Maybe I'll try to sneak some art chat in this week to see what Josh's thoughts are on the finer things.
I also want to give a shout out to our friend David Bloomberg, who has not been feeling well, and we wish him a very speedy recovery as he's been dealing with some challenges here in these last couple of weeks, and hope that we get him back on a podcast microphone sometime soon. And Jess, I also wanted to ask you, it's been a few days since we very sadly lost Alex Trebek, and as the biggest Jeopardy fan that I know of, that I would just, love to hear, any thoughts you had on the passing of Alex Trebek.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's a big loss for the TV world, and Jeopardy has been one of my favorite shows. I don't know if I was a day one watcher, but I was definitely a season one watcher as a very tiny child. And, I fall in and out of watching it regularly, especially like once you've been on the show. I think, Rob, you understand this. Once you've been on a show, you have to take a break from it after you come back. And that was how I felt. But that being said, it was my dream from the time I was about 6 years old. I said, I want to go on that show. I want to hang out with Alex Trebek. And I got that chance. I was very, very lucky to get that chance in 2006. And it was everything I wanted it to be. And he was everything you think he is just from watching him. Just an incredible guy, a consummate professional when it comes to hosting. And I really appreciate him, not just for the endless hours of entertainment he's brought, but for his role in helping to facilitate what was one of the best days of my life and really a dream realized. So I am pretty gutted by his loss, and I'm definitely going to miss his presence on my TV screen.
I mean, I think I do not think it is OTT to say how much Alex Trebek's specific hosting skills have carried over so much, especially during the boom of reality television. I know Jeff Probst came from Rock and Roll Jeopardy, which obviously leaned a lot upon Alex Trebek's hosting skills. I think it'd be safe to say the way that people like Jeff and Phil and others helm these shows, it would not be the same, or the way that Alex approaches things with both a sense of professionalism and a sense of personality. So, I mean, it's been a very terrible loss, but also a time to remember just how much of an icon he was in, and how much of a fixture he was in so many people's homes at 7:00 each and every night.
Yeah. And anybody that knows my backstory knows what a game show nut I was from a very young age. And I remember watching Jeopardy even when it was on in the afternoon when I came home from school. So he was a very formative presence in my life as well. Very sad to see him go. And, it was wonderful that he was able to stay on and host Jeopardy for as long as he was able to, as he fought his bout with cancer. And he will be very greatly missed by all of us. Thank you both for sharing that also here at the end of the show. Thanks everybody who joined us live. This was a lot of fun to get back on here and do an Amazing Race recap live. Very fun. And thank you so much, Scott St. Pierre, behind the scenes. We'll be back with the Tar Pits coming up. Make sure you subscribe to our Amazing Race podcast feed if that's what you would like to have more of. Go to robswebsite.com/TAR podcast. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.